Dear friends, a short video, an interesting theme, JFT Spirituality. JFT Spirituality. It sounds like JF Kennedy, but it's not. JFT stands for JesuFrancTheresena Spirituality. It's not new. In fact, it goes back to Jesus, the Barefoot Galilean. And it's really rooted in the Beatitudes, the Sermon on the Mount. But JesuFrancTheresena spirituality incorporates the spirituality not only of Jesus, the cosmic Christ, the Barefoot Galilean, but Francis of Assisi, the 12th century mystic, and also that of Theresa of Lizieux and Theresa of Avila. So here we have four very beautiful, spiritually motivated people, all in divine service to the Father, Mother, God. Jesus came from God to leave a blueprint, a legacy, a simple way of living. And to do that, he invited us to surrender our heart and to walk a simple path. And from the death of Christ, mankind, of course, fell by the wayside, became clever, and started to procrastinate, where many of his followers were ego-centered, ego-driven. And a lot of the original teachings of Jesus were compromised. And then in the 12th century, because the church had fallen into disrepute, from the very seat of Peter right down to local parish level. So God responded to the cry of their children by bringing an ordinary man, a soldier, who finally surrendered his heart and embraced a simpler way of living. Not in a monastery, and not as an ordained priest, but as a hermit. In his heart, he was personifying the core values of Jesus, the Barefoot Galilean, and trying to incorporate the Sermon of the Mount, the beautiful Beatitudes, in his daily life. So here we have Franciscan spirituality, which is about embracing the divine through the natural world, embracing Mother Earth, Brother Sun and Sister Moon. And if any of you have seen the video, Brother Sun, Sister Moon, you will know exactly what I'm saying about the life of the young Francis of Assisi. A very special gift to our hearts of how a young man was to change the world and bring back the compassionate Jesus. Bring back the selfless servant who could see God in everything, including the animal kingdom. And certainly his lifestyle and his teachings challenged the might of the church, who had become hedonistic and whose hearts were alienated from a loving God. And then we have the great Spanish mystic in the 15th century, Theresa of Avila, a Spanish noblewoman whom God used to reform the Carmelite order, where many of the sisters had become ladies of leisure, feasting, wining and dining, and more preoccupied about how they looked in their habit, with their servants carrying their train into choir. And Theresa certainly got stuck in. And I can just picture her now rolling her sleeves up and calling her sisters together to say, out goes the fancy designer shoes from Milan, and in comes the bare feet. Can you imagine? And out goes the fancy 5-course meals, and in comes a vegetarian diet. And then she introduced fasting, penance, and prayer. But what she gave us was a legacy in the interior castle, where she empowers the soul to surrender the heart to a loving God, eradicating that fear mindset and empowering the soul become the gateway to God. Theresa, like many of the great saints and like many of our great prophets, paid the price. She paid the price for her discipleship, because at that time we had the Inquisition, where she was accused of being a witch and where she had to face her contemporaries, where even some of her own sisters reported her because they were unhappy about having to live the monastic life as they should. And then moving on, we have little Therese, known as Tess, Therese of Lizieux, who introduced us to the little way of coming to a loving God as a child. And she personified all the teachings of Theresa of Avila, our foundress, and engaged with the simplicity of Francis, which resonated with the beating heart of Jesus, the Barefoot Galilean. Little Therese, from her monastery in Lizieux, gave us a blueprint, like many of the great mystics, of how to live and lead a simple life, of detachment from materialism and attachment to listening to the Word of God, to the voice of Spirit in one's heart in contemplation. Little Therese, though she never left her Carmel in Lizieux, she joined her other sisters, her blood sisters. But she touched the world through that ordinary life by doing the ordinary mundane things every day, scrubbing floors, dusting, fixing the candles for the altar, making the soaps out of leftover pieces of soap, by volunteering to make a friend of the sisters that she couldn't stomach, sisters that really must have got up her nose and drove her to mental illness. But no, she persevered in trying to see the Christ in every person. And after her death, years after her death, when she was canonized, she was made patroness of the missions, and yet she never was a missionary, having left her convent. But her little way is one of childlike simplicity, childlike trust, like Francis, like Theresa of Avila, and very much like Jesus, the Barefoot Galilean. I've often asked myself the question, what would Jesus think if he were to return to the seat of Rome today, to the church that was founded in his name? Well, I can only come to this from my heart. but I think he would be horrified to see how complacent it has become to human rights issues, and how materialistic and compromising the simplicity of a childlike confidence and trust. So JFT spirituality is as real today as it was for them. Peace.